Hey guys, tonight we're traveling somewhere a little uncomfortable. Okay, a lot uncomfortable. Imagine waking up not in your cozy bed, but on a pile of straw that smells faintly like mold and last week's livestock. There's no mattress, no fitted sheet, and absolutely no memory foam. Just you, a flea or two, and a draft sneaking through the wooden slats of your hut. Welcome to your one and only day in medieval times. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who's listening from their own humble peasant huts. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rooster's crow is not your alarm clock. It's your competition for who gets to be loudest at 5 a.m. You open your eyes to the ceiling beams above you, rough-hewn and slightly smoky from the hearth fire that never fully dies down. The smell hits you first: damp wood, stale sweat, and the unmistakable tang of fermented something. You think it might be cheese. It might be feet. Honestly, it might be both. Your back hurts, because of course you're lying on straw stuffed inside a coarse cloth sack. There's no pillow, just a crumpled-up tunic you folded 3 times and hoped would do. Spoiler, it doesn't. There's no such thing as pajamas, by the way. You've slept in the same linen shirt you wore yesterday and the day before. You shift slightly and the fabric makes that scratchy sound linen always makes before it becomes tolerable, sometime around its 5th owner. You sit up and bump your head on the low ceiling beam. Welcome to the Middle Ages. Please keep your hands and feet inside the time machine at all times, if only to avoid splinters. The floor is dirt. Not wooden boards over dirt, but actual dirt. Packed down with years of walking and animal traffic, a little damp in the corners, and somehow still gritty enough to sneak between your toes when you stand up. You scan the single-room hut. 1 wooden chest, a stool, a few clay cups, and the fire pit in the center of the room. A pot hangs over the embers, holding what you hope is last night's dinner and not something your neighbor's goat walked through. You're hungry, but first things first. Your morning routine. There's no bathroom. Instead, there's a bucket in the corner. And by bucket, you mean the communal vessel of shared shame. There's no privacy. Not because someone forgot to build a door, but because privacy hasn't been invented yet. Modesty? Cute idea. Not when you're sharing a single room with your parents, siblings, a grandmother who talks in her sleep, and a chicken named Bess. You stumble out the low door and into the gray dawn. Cold air smacks your face and your feet instantly regret not having shoes. You don't own boots. Those are expensive. Instead, you wrap your feet in rags and hope they don't come apart before you reach the communal well. The morning air smells of smoke, livestock, and wet leaves. You breathe deeply, trying to convince yourself this is earthy and authentic, like those scented candles pretend to be. But no, this is just what life smells like when soap is made from ashes and pig fat, and no one has bathed since St. Swithin's Day. Across the village, smoke rises from other huts. You hear clattering pots, children crying, a cow in distress, and someone yelling about an overdue rent chicken. Apparently, you're not the only one having a rough start. Breakfast is generous. If you like barley gruel, you ladle out a scoop from the pot. It jiggles, you eat it anyway. It tastes like what happens when oatmeal gives up on its dreams. Still, it fills you up, sort of. It'll get you through the morning. At least until someone burns garlic near a market stall and your stomach starts whispering betrayal. As you chew, you eye your only pair of shoes. Clunky wooden clogs that weigh more than your hopes and dreams. They're not built for comfort. They're built for mud. And mud is exactly what you're going to be walking through, because medieval roads are not roads. They're communal puddles with the occasional rock to trip over. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were actually as miserable as modern folks assume. Some claim daily life had its joys: simple pleasures, communal feasts, a slower pace, and sure, maybe that's true. After you've hauled water, shoveled manure, and avoided stepping on an angry goose. One quirky detail. Some villages had a tradition of singing while sweeping the home. Not for joy, but to warn off evil spirits. You hum a few notes just to be safe. Though if evil spirits are already in your socks, it might be too late. Back inside, you grab your belt and small knife, the only personal items you own. You wrap your ragged cloak around your shoulders. It smells of smoke and hay, but it's warmish. You're ready to begin your day. Kind of. You step outside again, stretch your sore back, and take a moment to soak it all in. The chickens scratching at your door, the neighbor already yelling at his goat, the low gray sky that suggests rain is coming whether you like it or not. You've made it out of bed, and in medieval times that's already an accomplishment. You haven't even had time to finish adjusting your itchy wool cloak before reality hits. Quite literally. A goat barrels past you trailing a bit of string in indignation, while a child runs after it screaming something that sounds like an insult but might also be a nickname. You dodge sideways, right into a patch of mud, and your foot squelches so deeply that your left clog is claimed by the earth with an almost ceremonial pop. You retrieve it, slightly less enthusiastic about this historical field trip. You haven't even reached the lavatory yet. And here's the thing. There isn't one. You try to remember your 21st century instincts. Where would a toilet be? Behind a door, with a fan, a lock, maybe a scented candle. But here in the medieval village, your options are the communal bucket, which, let's be honest, is already too full, or the open field, which is really just a ditch behind the livestock pens that everyone pretends is private, even though it's very much not. So you take the walk of humility, holding a clay pot meant for personal business, stepping around piles of who knows what until you find the spot. It's windy, the pot is cold, a sheep is watching you. You don't make eye contact. This is your introduction to medieval sanitation. Spoiler alert, it's not sanitary. Waste is tossed, somewhat ceremoniously, into ditches, alleys, or the street. Some towns had rules. Toss only after shouting, "Garde l'eau," which roughly translates to, "Look out for the pee." But not every household followed this rule, and streets often smelled like a blend of everything you hope to never step in barefoot. And yes, people did walk barefoot. Often. Historians still argue whether peasants were as accustomed to the stench as their writings suggest, or if they simply had no choice but to evolve their noses into a sort of survival mechanism. Either way, you're breathing through your mouth by now. It's not helping. You make your way toward the center of the village, trying to ignore the squish in your sock. As you approach the central well, a mossy, groaning structure that's both sacred and suspicious, you see a line of women drawing water. It takes effort, grunting, and awkward heaving of a bucket that feels like it's been forged from lead. You try to help. Your arms give up halfway through. One of the women snorts and finishes the job for you. You mutter a thank you and pretend you were just assisting. Carrying the full bucket home is another challenge. The wooden handle digs into your fingers, sloshing water soaks your rag shoes, and somewhere along the way you start wondering how anyone still has knees. But water is life. And since you're not legally allowed to bathe in it without attracting suspicion, you might as well use it to wash your turnips. Ah yes, the turnips, which were probably grown in a field fertilized with, you guessed it, human waste. Night soil, they called it. Romantic, right? Inside the hut, you attempt to freshen up. There's no mirror, no soap as you know it. Just lye, ashes, maybe a chunk of sour-smelling animal fat pretending to be cleanser. You scrub your hands in cold water and dry them on the same cloth everyone else uses. It's damp and textured. You notice your fingernails are already harboring more history than your local museum. Dirt, ash, and the faint memory of yesterday's porridge. It's fine. Hygiene is relative, after all. In the 14th century, people believed that bathing opened the body to disease. Water, they said, made your pores vulnerable to spirits, winds, and vaguely threatening vapors. So instead of bathing, they perfumed, or dusted themselves with powders made from herbs, flowers, and sometimes dried crushed worms. One fringe tidbit: upper-class folks were known to wear little pouches of dried lavender, or, in one famously bizarre case, dried hedgehog fur, around their necks as scent shields. You don't have access to lavender or hedgehogs, so you just pull your cloak tighter and hope for the best. Outside, a villager ambles by holding 2 full chamber pots. You wave. He doesn't wave back, maybe because his hands are busy, maybe because he's had enough of 2023 tourists trying to cosplay survival. You're not sure. You step carefully around a suspicious puddle and glance up at the sky. It's gray again. Always gray. You wonder what a sunny day looks like in this century, and if anyone here has ever seen a rainbow that wasn't just mold growing on old bread. You hear a splash and turn to see a dog lapping from a puddle next to a chamber pot. You wince. The dog wags its tail. Ignorance really is bliss. Historians still debate whether medieval villagers were entirely resigned to their, let's call it, organic environments, or if they privately longed for something cleaner. Some monastic records show attempts to organize public bathhouses or latrines. But for most peasants, life was lived close to the earth, and everything on it, in it, or leaking from it. You try not to think about it too hard as you wipe your hands on your tunic, mentally adding another layer to the growing funk of the day. A bell rings in the distance. It's not time for prayer, not yet. Just a reminder that it's morning, you're upright, and you've only barely survived your first attempt at hygiene. You sit down on a stool made from one very uncooperative log and stare into the fire pit. It's nearly out. You'll need to relight it soon using flint, steel, and a whole lot of wishful thinking. You lean back and let your brain go soft for a minute, imagining running water, soap that smells like coconut, and a toilet that doesn't double as a conversation piece. The dream vanishes with the next gust of wind. A goat sneezes behind you. You're pretty sure it's mocking you. Your break is short-lived. You can only sit on a log stool for so long before your tailbone files a formal complaint. Time to do what medieval people do best: work. But before you get to enjoy the thrill of turning soil with a splintery hoe, or carrying wood like you were reenacting a peasant-themed CrossFit class, you're summoned for another critical part of the daily grind: servitude. See, you're not just some plucky free agent frolicking through the 1300s. You're part of the feudal system, which means you owe labor to your local lord. Think of it as rent, but instead of paying in cash, you offer your spine, and maybe some blood if the sheep are feeling frisky today. You trudge toward the manor fields, your wooden clogs clacking and sticking alternately with each wet, clumpy step. The path curves past the churchyard, a quiet little plot filled with crooked headstones and even more crooked gossip. One of the women murmurs something about someone's baby being born with teeth. You try not to react. That is your third strange medieval fact for the day. Babies born with teeth were often considered omens, good or bad, depending on who you asked and how much sleep they'd had. You arrive at the edge of the field, where other villagers are already hard at work. They glance up with looks that range from exhausted to existential. A couple of them are teens who haven't smiled since the plague took their enthusiasm. You join the line at the tool pile. Your options: a hoe with a loose head, a rake missing half its teeth, or a shovel that's really just a flatboard on a stick. You choose the rake, if only for its resemblance to a weapon should things go sideways. Today, S task is clearing stones from a patch of land so it can be planted with barley. You bend, lift, toss, bend, lift, toss. It's repetitive, meditative, and incredibly hard on a body that had no say in its gym membership. Beneath the surface, the soil is stubborn. Clay, mostly. It clings to your fingers and tries to pull off your shoes like it's jealous of your mediocre footwear. You glance at the sun, still barely over the trees, and wonder how medieval time was tracked before watches. Fun fact, they used church bells, sundials, and, in wealthier estates, water clocks. But mostly, you just guessed based on the sun, and hoped someone else had a better internal clock than you did. Your back is starting to hum with that deep ache only medieval peasants and long-haul truckers truly understand. Sweat drips down your temple despite the chill, and a fly circles your head with the kind of persistence only medieval insects possess. You swat at it with the grace of a man slowly losing his will to live. Beside you, a girl around 14 expertly lifts rocks into a basket. She's missing a few teeth and hums a tune with no discernible melody. You ask her name. She shrugs. People just call me Pigbeth. You don't ask why. Some questions are best left buried like plague pits. Historians still argue whether the typical medieval workday was as brutal as it sounds, or if the year ES rhythm offered enough downtime during winter and holy days to make up for it. What they do agree on is this. Field labor was hard, and most peasants began it in childhood. If you're over 10 and still complaining about chores, Pigbeth is judging you silently. After a while, someone passes around a water jug. It's lukewarm and a little murky, but you drink like it's Fiji bottled. Hydration is hydration, even if you have to pick a twig out of your teeth afterward. Eventually, a bell rings in the distance. Noon. Time for a break, and thank the blessed saints because your arms are about to resign. You shuffle toward the shade of a small tree, where a few workers unwrap bundles of cloth that hold their lunch. You do the same, opening a coarse napkin to reveal your meal. More barley bread, a slice of hard cheese, and something that might be an onion or might be a dare. Either way, you eat it. Slowly. Chewing feels like effort now. One man across from you eats nothing, just chews on a twig and stares into the distance. You ask if he's okay. He mutters something about taxes and laughs, then keeps laughing. You make a mental note to give him a wide berth. Taxes, of course, are another part of the fun. Not just money, because you don't really have money, but in grain, chickens, labor, or, on unfortunate days, your dignity. A portion of whatever you grow, raise, or harvest goes to the Lord, and if it's not enough, well, don't let that happen. After lunch, you're roped into a secondary task, mucking the pens. Because livestock may be adorable in storybooks, but in real life, they poop. A lot. You step into the pen and are immediately greeted by a sheep with a 1,000-yard stare and a goat that clearly hates your vibes. You grab a wooden rake and begin to push straw and filth into a heap. The smell is spectacular, somewhere between sour milk, week-old stew, and existential crisis. Your eyes water. You press your cloak over your face like a low-budget hazmat suit. As you work, you overhear an old man telling a younger boy about the time the cow whispered his future. The boy nods solemnly. You file this under possibly metaphor, possibly heat stroke. Here is a quirky fringe tidbit. Some medieval peasants believed that if a pig sneezed while facing north, it meant a storm was coming. You look around. A pig snorts in your general direction. You take that as your cue to wrap things up. The afternoon winds down with a final sweep of the field, a muttered prayer at a wayside cross, and the dull, slow ache of muscles realizing this is just the beginning of your service to the manor. You drag your feet back toward the village as the sky starts turning orange. Sunset already? Or is that just smoke from someone's over-enthusiastic cooking fire? Either way, you're done with the fields. For now. You limp back to the village like someone who says lost a very long wrestling match with a sack of potatoes. Everything hurts, even your knees, which somehow weren't involved. Your hands are blistered. Your tunic smells like sheep enclosure and humble regret. And your stomach, despite the barley brick and questionable onion from earlier, is already demanding round 2. Luckily, or unluckily, depending on your attitude, you have some domestic duties waiting. You may not be a knight or noble, but congratulations. You are expected to contribute to the evening meal, tend the hearth, and help keep your family's hut from collapsing into a muddy heap. If you thought the outside work was tough, get ready to lose an arm to a cauldron lid. Inside the wattle and daub hut, basically twigs and mud with a strong opinion, You duck beneath the low doorframe and are greeted by a thick haze of smoke. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that may or may not be functional depending on the wind's mood. Your eyes water instantly. Breathing here is like doing gentle cardio in a sauna made of campfires. The center of the room is dominated by a fire pit, a few stones to hold pots, and a crude wooden bench that creaks in warning every time you sit. A woman nearby is stirring something in a pot that smells vaguely edible. Maybe lentils, maybe despair, and she gives you a side-eye that suggests you'd better chop those leeks or get out. You oblige, grabbing a knife so dull it qualifies as an emotional support tool. Cutting anything with this blade is an exercise in futility, but you manage to saw through some green stems, dumping them into the pot where they join boiled roots and maybe a bit of salted pork if you're lucky. Probably not. The odds are slim. Most peasants rarely saw meat unless it died of natural causes near their front door. And now here is your mainstream historical fact for the evening. Peasants typically ate a diet heavy in grains, vegetables, and legumes. Protein was rare unless you counted insects, and yes, sometimes you counted insects. Bread was a staple, but not the good kind. It was dark, coarse, and baked with whatever flour they could find, including ground-up bark in hard times. It was basically a chewable punishment. You help stir the pot with a stick that's older than most of your family members, and then it's time to fetch water. Again. Water fetching is basically a full-time job in the medieval era. You grab a wooden pail and head to the communal well, which is surrounded by gossiping women, one barking dog, and a child chasing a chicken like it owes him money. The bucket creaks as you lower it down, the rope groaning in protest, and you try not to look too closely at the greenish stuff floating on the surface. It's water adjacent, and that's good enough. You haul it up, arms trembling, and lug it back, sloshing a good third of it onto your legs and shoes. Back in the hut, dinner is served, if you can call it that. Everyone sits cross-legged around the bowl, dipping in with shared spoons or fingers. You're hungry enough not to care about hygiene, especially since hand-washing isn't a thing unless you're preparing for Mass. The stew is surprisingly decent. Warm, filling, and only a little gritty. After the meal, the embers in the fire are pushed together, and someone places a flat cake on a stone near the edge. Tomorrow's breakfast in the making. You shift your sore body toward the wall. Lean back and feel straw poke into your spine through the thin wool. This is your bed. A pile of hay, a lumpy sack, and the quiet company of a few mice. They ignore you as long as you ignore them. Mostly. One man, possibly your uncle, though no one is quite sure, starts telling a story about a nearby forest where a ghostly knight appears by moonlight and asks riddles in Latin. Someone giggles, someone else spits into the fire, and a child asks if they can see the knight too. The answer's no, because you're not going anywhere tonight, kid. The fire's warm, and the floor is not. Quirky fringe tidbit. In some regions, it was believed that if you whistled indoors, you'd summon evil spirits. So everyone goes very, very quiet when the toddler lets out a sharp whistle through his teeth. You all pretend not to notice, just in case. Eventually, someone takes out a wooden board with pegs and holes. It's not a game you recognize, but it vaguely resembles proto-checkers. You half-watch, your eyes growing heavier. The room gets darker, lit only by the glowing coals and the occasional flicker of a fat candle made from animal tallow. The smell is meaty, and that's the moment it hits you. The medieval day ends early. Not because people are lazy, but because there's no reason to stay up when everything is dark, cold, and expensive to light. Night is for sleeping, or, if you're unlucky, for dealing with whatever's crawling around in the thatch above your head. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants actually went to bed early or practiced segmented sleep, dozing for a few hours, waking in the middle of the night for chores or even socializing, then returning to bed until dawn. Either way, your body is ready to shut down now. No arguments. You lie back on the straw, using a folded tunic as a pillow, and let the sounds of gentle snoring, wind through the cracks, and the occasional mouse party lull you into the medieval version of REM sleep. Just as you drift off, someone outside shouts something about a cow being loose. You smile faintly, roll over, and decide it's someone else's problem tonight. The next morning, you wake up with a snort and a stiff neck, the straw imprint on your cheek making you look like a poorly woven basket. There's no alarm clock, unless you count the rooster, who screams with the smugness of someone who's never done a day of manual labor in his life. The hut is still dim, but the sky outside is turning a pale, uncertain blue. Your muscles ache like you've been trampled by a history textbook. Every joint pops as you sit up, brushing bits of straw off your tunic and checking, very calmly, for any new flea bites. You spot 3. They wave at you. You sigh. Someone passes you a crust of yesterday's bread, now even harder and somehow sharper. You chew it slowly, trying not to break a tooth. One bite in, and you understand why dental care wasn't exactly a thing in this era. Nobody had enough enamel to care for. Peasants often lost most of their teeth by their 30s. If you had a full smile past the age of 40, you were either nobility or a wizard. Your morning routine is already underway. You splash some of your precious water on your face, ice cold and instantly sobering, and scrub the grime off with a bit of cloth that may or may not have doubled as a sock yesterday. Your hygiene options are limited. No toothpaste, no soap, no deodorant. You rub a minty herb on your pits and hope for the best. Time to head back out. Today, you're part of the team repairing the village palisade. That's right, not only are you expected to farm, cook, and worship, but you also help keep your community safe. And by safe, we mean not entirely defenseless when someone else's sheep wander through and eat your barley. The palisade is basically a big wooden fence. Logs, sharpened and lashed together, form a spiky perimeter that looks vaguely threatening if you squint. Your job is to replace a section that's rotted away due to last month's rain. You join 3 others, all of them wielding crude tools and slightly better attitudes. One man, nicknamed Snot Henry, claims he once saw a band of raiders get scared off by a really angry goose. No one doubts him. As you dig the hole for a new post, you learn that your shovel is both blunt and full of personality. It kicks rocks back at your shins like it's in a mood. Mud clings to everything. A dog watches you work, tail thumping like it's enjoying the free entertainment. You briefly consider trading places. Historians still argue whether medieval communities maintained these defenses purely for practical protection or also for psychological assurance, keeping people calm in an uncertain world. Either way, they were mostly made of wood and hope. After a few hours of grunting, hauling, and wishing you were born into a future with ibuprofen, you manage to get the post in place. You wedge it deep into the earth, pack the sides with stones, and pat it like a cat that might attack if startled. Good enough. And now for your fringe tidbit. Some villagers believed that burying a dead animal, usually a small one like a chicken, beneath the base of a new post would strengthen the wood and protect the village from spirits. You glance around nervously. No chickens were harmed today, but you do notice Pigbeth eyeballing a squirrel. Best not to ask. As the sun climbs higher, your throat dries out again. Someone brings a weak ale to share. Yes, ale, in the morning. Water is risky. Low-alcohol brews are the safer bet, and they go down like a very foamy sigh. You take a sip and pretend to enjoy it. It's warm, flat, and tastes vaguely like someone's armpit had a yeast infection. But hey, it's sterile. Lunchtime approaches, and this time it's boiled cabbage with more bread and a pickle that may have fought in the Crusades. You eat quietly, the smell of smoke and soil in your nose, your fingernails black with dirt. You start to notice that medieval meals are more about survival than satisfaction. Salt is the only seasoning. Spices are for the rich, and even then, they're often used to disguise the flavor of not quite fresh meat. You cling to your cabbage like it's a trusted friend. After lunch, you visit the blacksmith's shed. It's not your job, but you're curious, and your arms need a different kind of pain. Inside, the air is thick with smoke, sweat, and the sharp tang of hot iron. The blacksmith is a barrel-chested man with arms like braided rope and eyebrows that could shelter a small bird. He nods at you and gets back to hammering what looks like a horseshoe, but might also be a vague suggestion of a horseshoe. You watch, mesmerized, as he pulls glowing metal from the forge and strikes it with rhythmic precision. Sparks fly. The sound is hypnotic. And here's your mainstream fact. Blacksmiths were essential in every village, not just for weapons, but for tools, nails, hinges, and even rudimentary surgical equipment. Yes, medieval tweezers were a thing. No, you don't want to imagine how they were used. The smith explains, shouting over the hammering, that iron is hard to come by and even harder to shape. Everything takes time. You ask about nails, and he shows you a bucket of bent rejects. Practice, he says, and then gestures for you to try. Big mistake. You grasp the hammer and attempt to strike. Your first blow misses entirely. The second barely dents the metal. The third, well, let's just say the smith gently takes the hammer back and tells you to stick to digging. You nod, relieved. Your thumbs live to see another day. Evening rolls in, and the village begins to quiet. Chickens settle in their coops, pigs shuffle toward shade, and children chase each other with sticks, laughing like they haven't seen 4 funerals this month. You're invited to a small gathering, just a few neighbors singing songs around a fire. You sit, still aching, and let the music wrap around you. A woman plays a lyre with trembling fingers. Another sings in a soft, reedy voice about a lost cow and a boy who turned into a star. The melody drifts upward, toward the smoke hole in your roof, and you feel, just for a moment, like maybe you've gotten the hang of medieval life. Then someone sneezes and the fire goes out. Naturally, the next morning, you wake up before the rooster this time. Mostly because your back decides to file a complaint with your entire nervous system, and partially because someone's sheep is bleeding like it's narrating a personal tragedy. You groan, swing your legs off the straw mat, and land ankle-deep in something suspiciously moist. It's best not to investigate. Medieval mornings are full of mysteries, most of which you don't want solved. Today is market day. You grab your travel sack, a rough, itchy pouch that seems custom-designed to ruin your shoulder, and trudge down the dirt road leading out of the village. The market is held in the nearby town, which is technically only a few miles away, but feels more like a pilgrimage for someone running on cabbage and last night's regrets. The road is muddy and uneven. You nearly twist your ankle on a rock shaped like a medieval tax collector's soul, sharp and unrelenting. Along the way, you pass other villagers, carts creaking under their weight, chickens squawking in baskets, and one man carrying what is definitely a pig wrapped in a baby blanket. No one says a word. Eye contact is avoided. It's the medieval version of minding your business. You finally reach the town's edge, where the wooden gate stands open, guarded by a man who looks like he's lost both a tooth and the will to enforce anything. He waves you through with a grunt. The town smells stronger than the village, a hearty mix of livestock, sweat, dung, and hope. You pause to inhale, and instantly regret it. You join the market crowd where stalls overflow with produce, fabrics, tools, and one extremely enthusiastic man trying to sell you a dead weasel for medicinal purposes. You decline politely. He seems offended. The weasel, oddly, does not. The sounds of the market are overwhelming. Bartering shouts, clinking coins, a lute being played with more confidence than talent. You spot barrels of dried beans, wheels of cheese so aged they've probably developed political opinions, and bunches of onions so pungent they're legally considered a weapon. You move on, curious about the entertainment. A juggler drops a turnip and plays it off like it was on purpose. A street performer in a jester's outfit, clearly homemade, tries to balance on a barrel while singing about the king's new taxes. You laugh, then remember public humor about the monarchy could get you executed, and immediately pretend you were coughing. Suddenly, the crowd parts as a small noble entourage clops by on horseback. The noblewoman wears a gown embroidered with enough gold thread to pay for an entire village's harvest. Her nose is slightly upturned, her posture rigid, and her expression is the medieval equivalent of "don't touch me." Her horse, meanwhile, looks like it would gladly retire right now and take up pottery. She tosses a few coins toward the crowd. Children scramble. You duck instinctively. This little moment reminds you of your place in the social order. Very low, possibly beneath the weasel vendor. You grab a roasted turnip from a food stand, burning your fingers and your dignity, but it's warm and strangely comforting. It tastes like it's been roasted over a fire fueled by broken dreams and old bread. Still, it beats another round of cabbage. Now for your mainstream fact. Medieval markets were not just for trade, they were also where laws were announced, disputes settled, and gossip exchanged. The town crier, who has the vocal range of a foghorn and the dramatic flair of a theater kid denied a lead role, shouts the latest news from the crown, something about a new tax on windows. You wonder how long it'll take before peasants just start bricking them up. And here's your fringe tidbit. In some towns, cheese rolling wasn't just a competition. It was believed to bless the season's dairy yield. The villagers would roll a wheel of cheese downhill, chase it, and if no one died, it meant good luck. You glance at the nearest wheel of cheese. It looks like it could do some real damage. You quietly step away. Later in the day, you stop by the town's well, where women are gathered drawing water and sharing whispers. You lean against a wall and eavesdrop. Not for the gossip, of course, but for historical context. Apparently, Farmer Ted's third wife just ran off with a monk. Again. You make a mental note. Monks aren't as boring as they look. One woman points out your tunic and asks if you're from the north. You nod. She replies that northerners are known for their strong backs and weak ankles. It's hard to tell if that's a compliment. Probably not. You refill your flask and consider whether this water is even safe. It's clearish. No floating bugs. That's good, right? You take a cautious sip, thinking of all those medieval waterborne diseases historians love to write about. Dysentery, cholera, typhoid. Take your pick. You sigh. Maybe the ale wasn't so bad after all. As the sun begins to dip and the market winds down, you gather your trades. Some dried herbs, that risky paprika beetle blend, a small cloth pouch, and a slightly dented tin cup. You didn't strike gold, but at least you didn't lose a tooth. You're calling it a win. You pass by a group of town guards as you leave. They eye you like a loaf of bread someone's already nibbled. You give a respectful nod. They grunt in response. One of them belches and scratches his armor. Knights, they are not. More like medieval mall cops. You start your walk back to the village, sack heavier, feet sorer, and head spinning slightly from the turnip ale combo you caved into trying. It tasted like defeat with a hint of clove. Twilight settles in. The sky painted with streaks of orange and soot. Owls hoot in the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf reminds you that you are most definitely not at the top of the food chain here. You grip your walking stick a little tighter. By the time you reach your hut, you're exhausted, dusty, and oddly proud. You survived market day. You didn't get trampled by a horse or tricked into buying miracle rat powder. You even haggled for herbs like a true local. And as you collapse onto your straw mat again, stomach fullish and spirits highish, you start to wonder, could you actually survive this medieval life? Then you roll over, stab your side on a chicken bone, and remember, no, you could not. You wake up the next morning to the soft shuffle of feet outside your door and the unmistakable sound of someone attempting to sing while milking a goat. It's not exactly a lullaby. It's more like a goat-themed opera, and the goat does not approve. You stretch, groan, and mentally prepare yourself for what's next. Your assigned stint of fieldwork. Ah yes, farming, the heart of medieval life and the bane of your modern spine. The village doesn't have any fancy machinery, no rumbling tractors or irrigation systems. Just you, your calloused hands, and a selection of tools that double as blunt instruments of medieval torture. Your hoe is splintered. Your spade is bent. Your motivation is non-existent. You join a small group in the fields just after sunrise, your feet already damp from dew and possibly something less romantic. You nod at the others, mostly stoic types who haven't smiled since the last good harvest, and begin the day work. Planting, digging, weeding, and occasionally swatting at bugs that seem genetically engineered to target your face. You grip the hoe and start turning the soil, which is stubborn and clumpy, like it's been holding a grudge since the Norman conquest. Your arms ache within minutes, and your back stages a minor protest. One of your neighbors smirks and says something in a thick accent about city folk. You nod like you understood. You absolutely didn't. Mainstream fact time. In the medieval world, about 90% of the population were involved in agriculture. Life revolved around the rhythms of the seasons. If the crop failed, so did you. And no, there were no refunds. You were stuck with whatever Mother Nature gave you, be it a bountiful harvest or the culinary thrill ride that is boiled bark surprise. You squint at the horizon. The sun is climbing higher, and your shirt is already soaked through with sweat. The others keep working in quiet, methodical rows. There's a strange rhythm to it all. The scrape of metal against earth, the distant baa of a sheep, the occasional scream from the woods that everyone politely ignores. Now, here is your fringe tidbit. Some medieval farmers believed singing to crops would help them grow. Not just chanting, but actual serenades. One old man in your row croons a warbly tune to his beats. They don't appear impressed, but he insists it helps. They like to feel special, he mutters. You decide to test the theory on your onions. You hum a few bars of something vaguely musical. Nothing happens. A nearby bird falls out of a tree. Perhaps it's a learning curve. By midday, you're starving. Fortunately, it's time for the communal meal. Bread, some root vegetables, a slab of cheese that could qualify as a building material, and, for dessert, turnips. Again, you're starting to suspect there's a medieval conspiracy to make turnips happen. Spoiler, they're not going to happen. Everyone eats slowly, saving their energy. You sit in a circle, legs stretched, and glance up at the sky. The clouds drift lazily, and for a moment, you almost forget how exhausted you are. Almost. Then you try to stand, and your knees sound like an old wooden ship. Kriak. The second half of the day involves livestock. You are assigned to the pigs. You approach the pen cautiously. They look at you with beady eyes, as if they know things. Important things. Embarrassing things. And honestly, they probably do. Feeding pigs is not as simple as tossing them food and walking away. They expect a show. You toss scraps into the pen, and one pig attempts to climb the fence with the enthusiasm of a drunken uncle at a wedding. You push it back gently, and it snorts disapproval. "We all hate this," you whisper. "Let's agree not to eat each other." Historians still argue whether pig farming in small villages was seen as a communal obligation or a necessary evil. Either way, you now have mud, or something pretending to be mud, smeared up to your elbows, and your dignity has fled the scene. Back at the village square, a traveling friar is giving a sermon under the old oak. His voice is booming and dramatic, like he's auditioning for the role of God's personal hype man. You lean against a cart and half listen as he warns about sin, temptation, and dancing. Dancing? Yes, apparently that's a gateway sin. You glance at your filthy tunic and aching limbs and think, honestly, I wouldn't have the energy to sin if I tried. He ends his speech by blessing a group of chickens and accepting a boiled egg in return. The barter economy is alive and clucking. You finish your chores as the sun begins its slow descent. You're sweaty, scratched, and sore in places you didn't know existed. But something about the honest work, even the smell, is grounding. This is the reality of medieval life. Repetitive, exhausting, and shockingly pungent. You take a moment to appreciate that in a world without digital distractions, people really did this every day, year after year, generation after generation. You walk back to your hut carrying a bundle of firewood. As you pass a few children playing with a ball made of pig bladder, yes, that's a thing, one of them kicks it in your direction. You fumble the catch, nearly trip, and instantly become the village's slapstick entertainment. Laughter erupts. Even the goat snickers. You bow dramatically. Thank you, I'll be here all week. No one understands you, but they clap anyway. You return home, start a small fire, and boil water with some of the dried herbs you picked up at the market. It smells like feet, but it might help your back, or your lungs, or your soul. Who knows? Medieval medicine is basically a grab bag of side effects and hope. The moon rises, soft and round in the sky, casting silvery light over the fields. You sip your herbal concoction and sit near the hearth. Your arms throb. Your feet are beyond sore. But you did it. You farmed. You herded pigs. You even endured medieval soup. You're still not entirely sure what was in it. And as your eyes grow heavy and the last embers glow in the fire, you whisper to yourself, one day at a time. Just not too many more, please. The next day begins with a rooster screaming directly into your soul. It's still dark, and you're curled in your scratchy straw bedding, wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of sheep and disappointment. The rooster, however, doesn't care about your sleep schedule. He's got opinions, and he's shouting them from the roof. You shuffle upright, joints creaking, and start layering your clothes like a medieval onion. The air is damp, your breath fogs the inside of your hut, and you mentally prepare for what's ahead, hygiene, or, more accurately, the suspicious lack thereof. Let's address the elephant in the room. You stink. Everyone stinks. The whole village smells like a gym locker got into a fight with a compost pile and lost. You reach for your wash basin, which is just a wooden bowl with slightly cloudy water, and splash your face. It does very little. You stare into the bowl. The water stares back. Hygiene in the Middle Ages is a mixed bag. Mainstream historians agree that people did wash, sometimes even frequently, but what counted as clean varied wildly. You scrub your teeth with a twig dipped in ashes. Tastes like despair. You rinse your mouth with wine vinegar, not for flavor, just because it might kill whatever's growing in there. You're not brushing for a dazzling smile. You're brushing to survive. And now comes the latrine situation. Your hut doesn't have plumbing. Nobody's hut does. You shuffle to the communal outhouse, a small wooden shack surrounded by buzzing flies and a lingering sense of regret. Inside, there's a hole. And that's it. No seat, no privacy. Just you and the eternal void. You do your business and realize too late that there's no toilet paper. Instead, moss. Lichen if you're lucky. A handful of hay if you're not. You use the hay. You are not lucky. As you walk back trying to forget the experience, you pass the local bathhouse. It's closed, again. Bathhouses are public and gender segregated, but also deeply unreliable. Some operate weekly, some monthly, some whenever the bathkeeper feels like boiling enough water to cover your ankles. Historians still argue whether these bathhouses were hubs of social wellness or just hot tubs of medieval microbial roulette. Either way, you've missed your window, and your window only opens once every other Thursday. But here's the quirky part. You might try a medieval deodorant. You crush mint leaves and rub them under your arms. It helps, a little. Someone once told you that rubbing rosemary behind your ears makes you smell like nobility. You now smell like nobility's neglected herb garden. Still, it's better than eau de pigpen. Mid-morning arrives, and with it, laundry. Your tunic has achieved sentience. You drag it to the village stream where several others are already scrubbing garments with soapwort and elbow grease. You dip your tunic into the water, which is icy and probably has fish judging your life choices. Scrubbing is rhythmic. Scrape, twist, slap against the rocks. A woman beside you hums a soft tune. You hum, too. After all, the onions seem to enjoy it. While you scrub, a man casually mentions the lice. Yes, lice. Everyone has them. You probably do, too. They live in your hair, your clothes, your dreams. You can try combing them out with a fine-toothed wooden comb. Or, and this is real, shave your entire head and wear a wig made of human hair. Seems extreme, but you make a mental note just in case the itching gets worse. Once your laundry is done, or at least slightly less horrifying, you hang it on a line strung between two sad-looking trees. The wind picks up, and your underthings flap cheerfully like little white flags of surrender. You sit beside them, catching your breath, as a nearby cat climbs into your freshly folded cloak. Of course, you no longer own that cloak. The cat does. After lunch, a thrilling repeat of yesterday's bread, cheese, and turnip parade, you head into the woods with a small group. Today's job, collecting medicinal herbs. Not because you're a trained apothecary, but because someone's goat stepped on a bee and now the village needs balm. You wander the undergrowth, eyes scanning for anything remotely helpful. You pick marigold, yarrow, and comfrey, plants that medieval herbalists swore by. Whether or not they actually worked. Historians still debate that. But hey, if it's green and doesn't bite, it's probably going into a poultice. A woman named Elfrida explains her secret salve recipe in hushed tones. Boil plantain leaves, mix with lard, and whisper a charm while stirring. The charm activates the healing, she insists. You nod politely. Who are you to argue with magic lard? Back in the village, the herbs are dried and pounded into powders or soaked in oil. You get assigned to mortar duty. It's basically medieval CrossFit. You mash dried sage until your wrists ache, then bottle it in a jar sealed with beeswax. It smells oddly comforting, like you're about to be cured and cursed at the same time. Before the sun sets, someone suggests you try the public well for a real rinse-off. It's not exactly a spa day. The water is freezing and you have to haul it up in a creaky bucket, then pour it over your head while trying not to scream. You manage a whisper yelp. Progress. Evening falls, and the village gathers for storytelling. Everyone sits around the central fire as one elder tells a tale about a knight who bathed in rosewater and was never defeated in battle. Because he smelled too good to kill, the old man grins. The others laugh. You laugh too. It might be the first time you've truly laughed since the goat screamed at you. You're still scratching your arms, but you feel okay. Not clean, but cleanish. In medieval terms, you're basically royalty. As the flames flicker, you lean back against a hay bale, your skin tingling from the cold and the lingering sting of your vinegar foot rinse. You've survived another day in a world where hygiene is less about sparkle and more about managing your microbial neighbors. And as your eyes close and the last embers pop in the fire, you think, I smell like mint and moss. And somehow, I'm fine with that. You awake to the smell of smoke, but not the comforting crackle from your hearth. This is the unmistakable scent of wood burning in a forge. You blink away sleep and follow the scent outside to the village blacksmith's workshop, where sparks fly and the hammer clangs against glowing iron with the rhythm of a heartbeat. The smithy is the noisy hub of the village, where steel meets sweat, and sometimes your patience. The blacksmith's arms bulge like ancient tree trunks as he bends and shapes the metal. His face is streaked with soot, his clothes patched more times than you care to count. You watch as he forges a horseshoe, a plow blade, and a rather questionable-looking set of tongs. Everything is handmade here. There's no Walmart for medieval metalwork. The mainstream historical fact, Blacksmithing was an essential craft, critical for agriculture, warfare, and everyday tools. No plow, no crops, no sword, no defense. No horseshoes, no happy horses. And believe me, horses really notice when their shoes are missing. Scholars still argue how much blacksmiths were revered versus feared. After all, they manipulated fire and iron, close to a kind of magic for many villagers. You're handed a small hammer and an anvil for your turn. Your first job is to smooth out a crooked nail. It feels like trying to straighten a snake made of steel. After a few wobbly strikes, you realize that the hammer weighs about as much as your entire arm. It's a workout you didn't sign up for. As you work, the blacksmith tells you about his secret technique, humming while forging. Apparently, the vibrations help shape the metal just right. You try humming, but it comes out more like a dying cat than a soothing song. The smith chuckles, says you'll get there. After struggling with nails, you move on to something bigger, sharpening a sickle blade. The blade glints dangerously, and you handle it with the respect of someone who has heard too many grisly stories about farming accidents. You carefully grind the edge, sparks flying, and for a moment you feel like a medieval artisan, not just a hapless city dweller stuck in the mud. Here is a quirky tidbit. Some blacksmiths were believed to have healing powers because of their close relationship with fire and metal. Villagers sometimes brought them to treat injuries or make protective amulets. Whether that's folklore or early medical practice is still up for debate. Midday is punctuated by the arrival of the town crier, who bellows out news, mostly taxes due and who owes what to whom. You wince. Taxes are a universal pain, no matter the century. The blacksmith grumbles about the new levy on iron goods, which will make tools more expensive. You realize medieval life had a version of inflation, too. After lunch, today's offering includes some barley porridge and a slightly mysterious stew. You get a crash course in leatherworking, because, yes, the blacksmith doubles as a cobbler. Your mission: help repair a pair of worn-out boots. The leather is stiff and smells like an old forest floor. You learn to punch holes, thread sinew, and hammer stitches into place. At one point, you accidentally hammer your finger. The blacksmith gives you a look that says, "Welcome to the club." You grit your teeth and ignore the throb. There's a quiet camaraderie in the workshop. Everyone shares a mutual respect for wounds earned in honest work. Meanwhile, a village elder stops by to admire your efforts and tells a story about a legendary blacksmith who forged a sword that never broke, but cursed its owner to eternal bad luck. You wonder if you just crafted something similarly cursed. Maybe your finger pain is the start of it. As afternoon slides into evening, you help clean the tools and tidy the workspace. The blacksmith offers you a small, roughly made iron pendant as a token. It's heavy and imperfect, but you feel oddly proud. Maybe you're a bit medieval after all. As darkness falls and the village settles into quiet, you head back to your hut, muscles sore but spirit oddly lifted. The scent of smoke lingers in the air, mixing with the earthiness of the day's toil. You think about the day's lessons, the strength it takes to shape metal, the patience to mend leather, and the unspoken bonds forged in the heat of the smithy. It's hard work, gritty and demanding, but somehow beautiful in its purpose. You lie down on your straw mattress, your hands still smelling faintly of iron and sweat. Your eyelids grow heavy as the village quiets. The only sounds now are the distant hoot of an owl and the occasional creak of wooden beams settling. As you drift off, you imagine the blacksmith's hammer ringing in your dreams, a steady, comforting pulse in a world where survival was a daily craft and every strike shaped more than just metal. The morning sun creeps over the horizon, casting a golden haze that feels like a gentle promise, but you know better. You trudge toward the village market, where the real chaos of medieval life unfolds, a cacophony of haggling, shouting, and the occasional pig trying to escape. Market day is a spectacle. Vendors hawk everything from fresh vegetables to dubious dried fish. You step carefully around mud puddles, animal droppings, and a persistent cloud of dust that makes your eyes water. The smell is a cocktail of earth, sweat, and whatever that is, probably not something you want to identify. You decide to inspect the bread stall first. Loaves are dense, often full of rye or barley, and occasionally a little gritty from the millstones. Bread was a staple, the cornerstone of every meal. Interestingly, the quality of bread was also a social marker. White bread for the wealthy, dark and coarse for peasants like you. Historians still argue how far this dietary divide affected health outcomes, but everyone agreed. Stale bread was a daily risk. A vendor offers you a sample of cheese, claiming it's aged to perfection. You take a bite. It tastes like it went through a rough day. Cheese in medieval times was mostly hard and salty, meant to last through long winters. You nibble, wondering if your teeth will survive. Nearby, a fishmonger hawks dried fish wrapped in leaves. The catch is often salted or smoked to preserve it, but sometimes it smells suspiciously like the swamp behind your hut. You consider passing, but remember you can't be picky. As you wander, a juggler performs for a small crowd, tossing knives and singing off-key ballads. The villagers watch with a mix of fascination and anxiety. Knives in a muddy street are always a gamble. Juggling was common entertainment, but this guy's act might be more dangerous than the plague. Speaking of plague, the market is also a hotbed for disease transmission. Crowds, animals, and little understanding of germs make it a perfect storm. Historians still debate how much markets contributed to medieval pandemics, but for now, you do your best to avoid touching your face. You stop at the herb stall, where dried flowers and leaves are displayed in neat piles. The herbalist offers you a sprig of lavender for calming the spirits. You tuck it behind your ear, trying not to look too hopeful. Aromatherapy in the Middle Ages was as much about superstition as science. Some swear by it, others roll their eyes. Next, you visit the blacksmith's assistant selling iron nails and tools. Prices are rising thanks to taxes. Remember those? You think about your day in the forge and decide to splurge on a small knife, useful for everything from food prep to defense. You wonder how many hands have held it before. Then comes the barter. Coins are scarce, so goods often exchange hands in trade. You offer a basket of eggs for a bundle of firewood. The firewood seller inspects the eggs suspiciously but agrees. Trade is an art form, every transaction a delicate dance of trust, necessity, and sometimes bluffing. Suddenly, a loud crash interrupts the market's rhythm. A cartwheel breaks, spilling apples onto the muddy street. Villagers rush to help, scrambling over rolling fruit. It's chaotic but strangely heartwarming. You join in, laughing as you try to catch a slippery apple. The market, for all its grime, is the village's beating heart. A group of children play nearby, tossing a leather ball. Their laughter cuts through the market noise like a fresh breeze. You watch them, feeling a pang of nostalgia for simpler times. As the sun climbs higher, you seek shade under a worn oak tree and unpack your modest lunch. Bread, cheese, and a small hunk of salted pork. You chew thoughtfully, pondering how much life in the Middle Ages revolved around food scarcity and preservation. A wandering minstrel passes by, strumming a lute and singing of faraway lands and heroic knights. You can't help but smile. Even in the mud and chaos, there's a hunger for stories, for escape. Before leaving, you pause at a fortune-teller's tent. She peers into a cracked crystal ball, mutters about your fate entwined with fire and iron, and demands a coin. You hand it over, half amused, half skeptical. After all, fortune-telling was a popular pastime, blending mysticism with human hope. As you leave the market behind, your pockets lighter but your spirit strangely lifted, you realize the medieval marketplace was less a chore and more a communal event. Messy, noisy, but full of life. You trudge back to your hut, boots caked in mud, belly half full, heart a little fuller. And maybe, just maybe, you'll last another day after all. Evening descends quietly, but the village is far from silent. You wander toward the communal well, the center of social life after work hours. The sun's last light flickers on the wooden bucket, and the air smells damp and faintly of moss. Here, water is more precious than gold, though that doesn't mean it tastes like it. It's often cloudy, with a hint of what you hope isn't sewage. You meet other villagers, farmers, weavers, children, each hauling their own container, exchanging news, gossip, and a few well-meaning insults. The well is where stories flow as freely as the water, and you find yourself drawn into the current. You hear about the upcoming festival, a rare break from routine involving music, food, and questionable dancing. The village bard promises to tell the tale of a local hero who once wrestled a wild boar with his bare hands. Whether this actually happened or was a drunken exaggeration is a topic historians still debate with great enthusiasm. Nearby, a group of women prepare herbs and poultices. You remember your friend the herbalist from the market and watch as they crush lavender, mint, and something called comfrey. These plants were the medieval equivalent of the pharmacy, used to treat everything from sore feet to fevers. Interestingly, onions were sometimes mashed into a paste and applied to wounds for their antibacterial properties, a practice still under scrutiny by modern science but clearly valued back then. The conversation drifts to the village's health woes. Stories abound about the Black Death that swept through years ago, wiping out a terrifying portion of the population. You shudder, realizing how fragile life was. Historians still argue the exact causes and spread of the plague, but there's no doubt it changed the medieval world forever. As twilight deepens, torches flicker to life, casting dancing shadows. You're invited to join a group playing a dice game that's as old as dirt, but just as addictive. The rules are simple. Roll, bet, win, or groan in defeat. You try your luck and quickly learn that medieval gambling is just as cruel as modern casino nights. Laughter bubbles up, punctuated by groans and playful insults. The dice clatter on the wooden bench, the sound oddly comforting. You realize that these moments of leisure, however brief, were vital. Life was harsh, but humanity found ways to soften the edges. Someone pulls out a wooden flute, and soft, airy notes drift through the night. The music feels timeless, weaving a spell over the tired crowd. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the melody wash over you like a gentle tide. A nearby fire crackles, sending warm, orange light onto the faces around you. Someone shares a stale piece of bread dipped in honey, an act of simple kindness that feels luxurious. You bite in, savoring the sweetness mixed with the chewiness, a reminder that even the smallest pleasures mattered. The sky deepens to a velvety blue, stars beginning to peek through. You think about the village's ancient stone circle just outside town, rumored to have mystical powers. Some say it was a calendar, others insist it was a portal to another world. Scholars still argue, but the locals treat it with reverence. As the night winds down, you feel a strange mix of exhaustion and contentment. The well, the fire, the music, it's a patchwork quilt of medieval life's softer side. You make your way back to your hut, footsteps light on the earthen path. The village sleeps, but the echoes of the evening linger like a warm blanket. Your thoughts drift to tomorrow, another day in this unforgiving, fascinating world. And somehow, you're ready. You wake slowly to the soft chirping of birds outside your window, the dawn light filtering through crude wooden shutters. The air smells fresh, a brief reprieve from the usual earthy musk of village life. As you sit up, you reflect on the relentless cycle of medieval days, each one a delicate balance of toil, survival, and small joys. Today, you decide to visit the village healer. The healer's hut is humble, a modest shelter lined with dried herbs, strange bones, and jars filled with mysterious concoctions. The scent is a blend of lavender, garlic, and something faintly medicinal, enough to make you hopeful, yet wary. The healer, an elderly woman with kind eyes and a knowing smile, explains that ailments are treated with a mix of herbal remedies and rituals. She prepares a poultice using mashed onions, recalling how ancient Egyptians used onions to treat sore feet, a practice that somehow survived millennia. You press your foot gingerly on the floor, appreciating the idea that some simple cures have stood the test of time. You learn that medieval medicine was a curious mix of observation, superstition, and trial and error. Bloodletting was common, as was the use of leeches, practices historians still debate for their efficacy and harm. You wince at the thought but marvel at the resilience required to face illness with such limited knowledge. The healer offers you a cup of nettle tea, warm and slightly bitter. As you sip, she tells tales of past patients, including a knight who swore by garlic for warding off bad luck and, apparently, bad smells. Garlic and onions weren't just food, they were medicine, protection, and sometimes superstition all rolled into one. You ask about the role of prayer in healing. The healer nods, explaining that faith and medicine were intertwined. Many believed illness was a punishment or a test, making spiritual care as vital as herbal cures. This blend of science and spirituality is still a hot topic among historians. After the visit, you wander through the village, noticing how daily life continues despite the shadows of disease and hardship. Children play, farmers tend fields, and merchants pack up their stalls. Life, stubborn and persistent, pushes forward. Your thoughts turn to the simple pleasures you've found: the taste of bread, the sound of laughter, the feel of warm earth beneath your feet. You realize that medieval times, while harsh beyond modern imagining, were also full of moments that connected people to each other and the land. As the sun climbs higher, you settle back into your routine, carrying with you the knowledge that history isn't just dates and facts. It is the lived experience of countless souls who, like you, face their world day by day. Tonight, as you lie down under your rough wool blanket, the sounds of the village fade into a soft murmur. The scent of onions and herbs lingers faintly, a comforting reminder of the past's strange but enduring wisdom. You close your eyes, heart a little lighter, ready to drift into sleep wrapped in the stories of those who came before. Wind down. The day slips gently away as you settle deeper into your bed. The rough edges of medieval life blur into a soft haze, like a dream melting at dawn. You breathe slowly, feeling the rhythm of your own heartbeat align with the distant echo of blacksmiths' hammers, the murmur of market crowds, and the whispered prayers of healers. The scent of earth and herbs lingers faintly in the air, mingling with the quiet hum of night. You imagine the gentle sway of lantern light through wooden beams, the soft creak of aged doors closing, and the cool touch of night air brushing against your skin. There's a strange comfort in the knowledge that life, even in its harshest form, always finds a way. That every struggle was met with resilience, every pain soothed by simple remedies, every sorrow softened by human connection. Let your mind drift on this slow current of time, where ancient onions soothe tired feet, and every small act of care weaves the fabric of history. Now, rest easy. The past is with you, quietly watching as you fall deeper into dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.